All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be the aftermath video for the Teofimo Lopez versus Richard Comey fight, as well as the Terence Crawford versus Mean Machine fight. I want to congratulate both Teofimo Lopez as well as Terence Crawford for their exemplary performances. But first, let me start off with Mr. Teofimo Lopez, who was extraordinary. I have to give him a whole bunch of credit. I've seen him fight maybe 3 or 4 times before this bout last night. He's always impressed me, but it's very difficult to gauge how great a fighter is until he gets into the ring with higher level competition. This was his first championship fight, and I was using Mr. Richard Comey as a barometer for how great or how good Mr. Teofimo Lopez was going to be. If he won the fight, whether he won by decision or by knockout, he was going to be a champion regardless, and he would have beaten a champion. So he would have gotten my credit unless something shady or funny would have happened, like some type of strange knockout, and that is not what we got last night. Teofimo timed him perfectly. He hurt him multiple times in just a round and a half. He caught him with a perfect right hand, one of those Rocky Marciano Suzy Q punches where he takes his head out of the line of fire and then himself fires an overhand right. He happened to catch Richard before Richard caught him, and Comey never truly recovered. And he's known for being a fighter who has very quick recovery and a great chin. So just the fact that Teofimo Lopez hurt him multiple times and finally really stopped him with that right hand, despite the fact that he got back up and tried to fight, shows you the type of power that he packs. He reminds me a lot of a young Roberto Duran, who has clearly been influenced by Floyd Mayweather. A lot of his movements, his defensive maneuvers, is very clear that he grew up a fan of Floyd Mayweather Jr. So once again, kudos to him. He did a great job. Supposedly his next fight is going to be against Vasily Lomachenko. That's like going from graduating from high school to now all of a sudden trying to pursue your master's degree. So we're going to find out one way or the other exactly how great Teofimo Lopez is. We found out last night that he's a championship level fighter and a good to borderline, very good, maybe even great fighter. He's going to have to get into the ring against another great fighter to cement exactly how great he is. So we'll find out about that next year. Now on to Mr. Terence Bud Crawford. There's a lot going on revolving around Mr. Terence Crawford, not only in reference to his greatness as a fighter, but also the political intrigue that is occurring right now between Top Rank and the PBC. And it's very important that brothers understand this. I've been reiterating this over and over again. It's very clear that Top Rank understands that they have no other fighters left to feed him. There's a reason why this card was on regular ESPN last night and not ESPN Plus. It's because they cannot afford to pay a fighter of Terence Crawford's pedigree the amount that he deserves if he's not going to be getting into the ring with a name recognition fighter. So it's a major problem for them, and they've now resorted to having many of their boxing commentators and analysts try to publicly shame Errol Spence on national TV and the other PBC fighters, and it's only going to blow up in their face. One of those fighters right here being Mr. Timothy Bradley, someone who's always been a shill for Bob Arum. And no disrespect to the brother, but multiple times last night I had to mute the TV because his voice was so grating. His voice is not really built for commentating, and it's very clear that he's more concerned with making sure that the audience is trying to remember him as opposed to the fight, because he talks clearly when he should not be speaking during the action. But anyway, I'm going to let them speak. Pay very close attention to what Mr. Timothy Bradley does, as well as the confirmation that he tries to get from Mr. Andre Ward, who himself tried to call out Errol Spence the day before. So it became very clear to me, crystal clear, that they've been given the edict from Top Rank, whether it be Bob Arum or whoever else is in charge in that organization, that they have to start publicly calling out PBC because they're losing money. Also, please keep in mind that not only is Andre Ward a paid commentator for ESPN and Top Rank, he's also the manager for Mr. Shakur Stevenson, whose promotional company is Top Rank. So nothing that they really say can be trusted when it comes to the political landscape of the boxing world right now. I don't think that they quite realize what they have done, because they've taken an unprofessional route to try to smoke out the varsity welterweights over at the PBC. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
You know when somebody's different. Bud Crawford's different.
All I'm going to say is this, Tess. The only real man over at PBC is Deontay Wilder. You want to know why?
Because he's helping Top Rank make some money when you guys are on your last legs. That's why. Look at Andre Ward's face, standing there like he's a mafioso or some shit.
to be fighting Tyson Fury in February. Now you got...
Yes, a fight that made itself. They already fought earlier this year. Tyson Fury only signed with Top Rank due to assurances that they were going to make the fight with Deontay Wilder. That's the only reason why he signed there in the first place. Also, keep in mind that Tyson Fury is from Britain. So they kind of hover above a lot of this mess that's going on with the American fighters when it comes to the issues between the PBC and Top Rank. We're seeing Top Rank people constantly trying to use Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder as an example of how a fight can be made. Please keep in mind that as of right now, there are still issues with Deontay Wilder making a fight with Anthony Joshua. So that's another issue. Of course, that's beyond the Top Rank PBC issue, but that just goes to show you that when fighters have political issues and also monetary problems, disparities in who deserves more money, so on and so forth, it is going to stop certain fights from getting made. Please keep in mind that what Terence Crawford is doing right now at the behest of Top Rank is making financial offers to PBC fighters that he knows that they're not going to accept because he's offering them B-side revenue. And they're not going to accept that because his B-side offer to them is less than they make as a B-side fighter over at the PBC. A lot of these guys are making more money than Terence Crawford is making as a champion. I'd be willing to bet that Danny Garcia is making more money as a highly ranked contender than Terence Crawford is as a champion over at Top Rank. I have very little doubt about that. So those are a lot of the things that are going on behind the scenes. But at the end of the day, Tim Bradley needs to fall back. Like, he's been a shill for Top Rank for almost a decade now. If you remember, the reason why he got the first Manny Pacquiao fight is because in his build-up to fighting one of his last fights at 140, it may have been Lamont Peterson or someone like that he was building up the fight for, or he was training for. He made a statement in which he said that he thinks that the reason why the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight had not happened, and this was around 2010, he said that in his view, the reason why that fight has not happened is because Floyd Mayweather is scared of Manny Pacquiao. That's what he said. And almost immediately after that, he got the fight with Pacquiao. So I'm going to guess this was around 2011 because I think that he fought Pacquiao in 2012, if I remember correctly. So he's been shilling for them for a long time. And the funny thing about Tim Bradley is that he basically said what Bob Arum wanted him to say about the Mayweather-Pacquiao situation. He got the fight. He acted as the stand-in for Floyd Mayweather, you know, the short bald-head black guy. He's like the stunt double for Floyd. He got a gift decision, one of the worst gift decisions in modern boxing history, in a fight of that high of prestige or rank or esteem. And he almost became suicidal after that, because he thought that once he got the decision over Pacquiao, that all the energy that they had invested in Pacquiao would be converted over to him. And that's normally how simpletons think. They don't understand the reality of the situation until it manifests itself. He's a two-dimensional dude. He's a basic dude. He's just happy to have a job over at Top Rank, being able to call the fights. That's why he got the job in the first place. But you're supposed to have more respect for the boxers that engage in getting into the ring and risking their lives than to get on TV and act like you're working for the WWE. You're an announcer. You're a commentator. You're not supposed to be making statements like that. Because now, if you're Keith Thurman, or you're Danny Garcia, or you're Errol Spence, you're going to go tell Al Heyman, even if I really wanted to fight Terence Crawford next, first, these guys have to issue a public apology during their next boxing broadcast. And we have to make sure that if and when we do fight Terence Crawford, whether it be Keith Thurman or Sean Porter or whoever, that these guys are not calling the fight. Because they're so impartial, they might have the viewing audience leaning towards Terence Crawford, even if he's losing the fight, just based on what they've done right here. So this was very poor tact, and I don't know who advised them to do this, but that person should think again. It's very obvious they're not going to do this on national television unless they were told to do this by someone who has very little business acumen or who is desperate at this point. So I'll say maybe it was Bob Arum. We know that Bob Arum has great business acumen, but he is desperate. And Bob himself will get desperate on television. He will start to levy ad hominem attacks on people who he thinks are fucking with his money. Because he misses the days back in the 1980s where he can call up Don King and they could joke about which fighters they were shitting on and robbing blind. He can't do that anymore. So now he has to have his shills on television do it for him.
There are all the other welterweights over there. This man is begging to fight you.
Tim Bradley, if Terence Crawford is the #1 fighter in the world, which he arguably is, and he has to beg to fight these fighters over at the PBC, what does that mean? That obviously means that he is the B-side. He's going to have to accept that. He's also going to have to accept all of the other demands at the PBC. It's what's called the business world. You will not see Errol Spence or Sean Porter or Danny Garcia or Keith Thurman begging Terence Crawford for a fight. You know why? Because they have all the competition that they need over there already. That's why I stated Terence Crawford should have signed with the PBC. All of these problems would have diminished. A lot of his fanboys still do not get that. Well, how come they just can't make the fight? How come they just can't make the fight? Bro, it doesn't work like that. It's like saying, how come we just can't have a comic book where Spider-Man fights Batman? How come we just can't make that happen? It's because one character is on Marvel and the other one is on DC. So in order to make that comic book work, we have to work out a lot of logistics. A lot more logistics than we would have to work out if we have super fights in-house. And that gets back to the real problem that Top Rank has. They have no super fights for Terence Crawford. They have no more opponents for him to fight because no one wants to see him fight another no-name bum. On the PBC side, they can make a bevy of big fights. Is there even a fighter on the Top Rank side as good as Yordenis Ugas for Terence Crawford to get into the ring with? He's like a second-tier fighter, maybe even a third-tier welterweight on the PBC side. There's no one at the Top Rank side who offers that level of competition for Terence Crawford. And that's a huge, huge issue for them right now. Now, Kell Brook has recently come out and stated that he has tried to make a fight with Terence Crawford, and both times he got turned down. I wonder why that is. Could it be because, number one, he doesn't have a belt? Number two, his name is not as big as it used to be. And number three, he's not on the Top Rank stable, so it would not be worth their time. Could it be that they're trying to troll the PBC right now because they know that PBC is where the money is at? Could that be the case? And just getting back to Tim Bradley, once again, this is a guy who basically tried to throw Floyd Mayweather under the bus so that he can get a fight with Manny Pacquiao. Got a gift decision, became so depressed that he went on a kamikaze mission against Ruslan Provodnikov and almost lost his damn life in the process. Suffered brain damage that I don't think he still has recovered from, damn 8 years later. On TV yelling like an idiot.
They continue to beg to fight you guys. Guys need to put your big boy pants on and need to come over and make this fight with Terence Bud Crawford.
Now, why would fighters from the PBC come over to ESPN to make a fight with Terence Bud Crawford? That's not how you're supposed to be speaking. You just said that Terence Bud Crawford is begging them. So that means that he and Bob Arum are going to have to accept that if the fight does get made, they're going to have to fight on Showtime or a PBC network or something like that. That's what happens when you beg. You cannot beg and make demands. You beg and make requests. That's how it works.
He's the best welterweight in the world.
Now, I agree with that. That's about the only thing that you've said that I agree with. The rest was just a bunch of nonsense and an emotional diatribe from someone who clearly is mentally unstable and has been prompted by an executive to throw yourself on the sword and say things that Terence Crawford himself seems to not have the business acumen to say. They asked Terence Crawford point blank after the fight, who do you want to fight next? And all he said was, well, you know, whoever they put in front of me. Nah, bro, it doesn't work like that at this level. At the level that you're at, when you have no more opponents, you better start calling out names. He knows that he can't call out Errol Spence because Errol Spence is laid up. He can't call out Keith Thurman because Keith Thurman's coming off of a loss. He can't call out Sean Porter because Sean Porter supposedly is his good friend or like a brother to him or some other bullshit. He can't call out Danny Garcia because Danny Garcia is lining up a fight with someone else, and plus he's already made offers to Danny Garcia and Danny Garcia turned him down. So this is what happens when you don't understand the business of boxing.
Here's the bottom line.
Now look at Tim Bradley. After his little speech, he looks at Andre Ward for acceptance or for approval or what have you. I'm going to show you later on in this video why he's doing that. It's very clear that he and Andre Ward had a discussion about this before the broadcast, and they already decided that they were going to disrespect Errol Spence and the PBC because Andre Ward did this himself in the telecast the day before the weigh-in special that Max Kellerman did on ESPN.
You can talk about all the promotional lines and the politics of boxing you want. If a fighter wants a fight's going to get
That's
made.
right.
I agree with that to a certain degree, but this is a notion that's being put out by people who themselves are desperate to have the fight get made. When you have a fighter who says, no, I want that guy and I don't want anybody else, make this fight happen. What that normally means is you're going to have to take less money. You're not going to have a decision on who the referee is going to be, who the commentating team is going to be, which network broadcasts it, things like that. So the management team or the promotional team will tell you, okay, if that's what you want, but understand that you're going to get far less money. At this point in Errol Spence's career, or for many of the other fighters on the PBC, why would they be willing to take less money to try to fight Terence Crawford for his WBO belt when there are 3 belts on the PBC side? It makes no sense whatsoever. Once again, it all goes back to the fact that Terence Crawford, for some strange reason, decided that he was going to re-sign with Top Rank when he easily could have made everything much easier for himself and made more money had he just gone to the PBC. But once again, just getting back to that point that Joe Tessitore tried to put forth, which is something that people say when it's in their best interest to force a fight to happen. Well, if fighters want a fight to happen, it'll happen. Absolutely. No doubt about it. As long as they understand that they're going to have to give up a lot of their advantages. And if a fighter's that desperate, maybe for revenge or for a title or what have you, yeah, they'll say that. I want this fight to happen. You make it happen. Yes, it's going to happen, but you're not going to receive the amount of money that you would normally make. Are you willing to understand that?
Bud Crawford will fight anybody. A fight's going to get made if a fighter wants a fight. Dre, your final thoughts on the evening.
Shout out to the young fella, Teofimo Lopez.
Yes.
He's dealing with a lot. He shouldered it. He performed under the lights. He fulfilled his father's prophecy to become a champion with under 15 fights or at 15 fights. He earned the right to face Vasily Lomachenko. Yeah. Terence Crawford, I didn't need to see this tonight to know what he had in him. That's why he's been atop my list for as long as he has.
And by the way, that was not a great performance by Terence Crawford. He just happens to be a great fighter. A great fighter, by the way, who used to whoop Tim Bradley's ass in sparring back in the day. When Tim Bradley brought Terence Crawford in as a sparring partner and ended up finding out that, wow, this guy's better than me. And that happens with a lot of big-name fighters. They bring in these no-name sparring partners and are getting their asses whooped in sparring every day. And unless that fighter is able to link up with a high-level promotional company or great management, you never hear about them. Well, a lot of these star boxers, they get their asses whooped in training camp on the regular by dudes who just don't have the connections that they have.
This just confirmed and proved what I already knew. He's going to be a hard man to beat, man, because he's...
But just getting back to the point what I was originally saying, Terence Crawford, that was not a great performance by him. He had the wrong game plan coming into the fight. He said after the fight that the reason why he started in the southpaw stance instead of the orthodox stance is because of what his trainer told him. I believe that his trainer, Bomac, told him to start the fight in the southpaw stance because they wanted to get that guy out of there earlier to impress the crowd, because I think that they understood that no one knew who the opponent was, and the longer the fight lasted, the worse that it would make Bud Crawford look. He took a lot of shots in the southpaw stance. Bud Crawford is a person who will be available to be hit. He does have very good defense and good evasiveness when he's in a defensive mode, like he was against Postal early in their fight. But when he's offensive, he does get hit a lot. Also keep in mind that he's 33 years old. That's the same age that Floyd Mayweather was when he fought Shane Mosley back in 2010. And if people remember, during that time period, a lot of quote-unquote boxing pundits were saying, why is it that Floyd is walking everybody down? Is it because he's losing his legs and things of that nature? I'm not saying that Terence is losing his legs, but I do believe that when he got into the ring against Mean Machine last night, he thought that he was just going to walk through that dude, especially early on when he kind of measured him and he realized, okay, this guy has great timing, because he was getting caught with that straight right hand all throughout the early portion of the fight, and he did get knocked down. They called it a slip, but that was a knockdown.
And if you hit him, some guys, when you knock them down and when you hurt them, they come back stronger, and he did that tonight.
Yeah, he was...
The reason why Andre Ward stated that is because he himself got knocked down against Kovalev, and he got up and came back stronger.
Make a fight of it and finishing it on his terms. The outcome that many of us expected just not the path taken that we expected, but I agree with you. The biggest takeaway for me tonight was Teofimo Lopez.
I agree. He seems to be a star in the making. Now, I need to see somebody really test his jaw to see what type of resilience he has. But when it comes to his overall skill set, he seems to have it all. Great footwork also.
This place was roaring.
Yes.
It was electric. And now in 2020, we should be seeing him in against Vasily
Can't
Lomachenko.
wait.
That's going to be for his master's degree. Okay, so now this is Andre Ward in his appearance on the show Max on Boxing a day before the Terence Crawford versus Mean Machine fight. And he himself is going to do the same thing that Tim Bradley did in disrespecting the PBC side, particularly Errol Spence. It's very clear to me that they have been given some type of edict by an important figure over at Top Rank to make sure that if we're not going to win the revenue war with the PBC, we have to win the propaganda war, because we're running out of people. We basically ran out of people for Terence Bud Crawford to fight. So let's pay very close attention to what Andre Ward does pretty much without prompt from Max Kellerman. Or maybe, hell, maybe it was prompted by Max Kellerman. Who the hell knows?
Back with Andre Ward. You heard from the champ just now, Andre. What are your closing thoughts on what you just saw?
Crawford seems locked in like he's always locked in. You know, it takes one to know one. So whether
Humble brag.
facing another pound-for-pound guy, or he's facing a mandatory in Kaviaskis, the approach is the same. The intensity is the same, because with a guy like him, there's no room for error. He can't look bad tomorrow and win. He has to look spectacular to stay in the hunt, to get the other belts and get the other guys in the 147-pound division to face him. And
I'm not quite sure if I agree with that. I'm on record as stating, at least in reference to some of the statements that Terence Bud Crawford has made, and his view that he should be viewed as the #1 guy over the 147-pounders at the PBC because of his accomplishments at 140. I say no, it does not work that way. But I will say this, when it comes to regard for Terence Crawford, you have to take into account the entire package. It's not just going to be one performance that's going to make people say he no longer deserves a fight against the PBC guys. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to how much is each side going to be willing to capitulate when it comes to their demands, and how much will each fighter be willing to humble themselves in order to try to chase belts and chase prestige, as opposed to doing what's best for their pockets.
this about that. It's kind of like this laughing joke around boxing right now that Crawford doesn't have any other competition. That's not his fault.
No, bro, actually it is his fault. Because Terence Crawford did not have the business wherewithal to say to himself, okay, I've done what I can do in the 140-pound division. My contract is up with Top Rank. This is the perfect time for me to leave them and go sign with the PBC so that I could try to wreck shop at 147 pounds. And then once I'm done there, once my contract comes to an end, because a lot of those guys over at the PBC, many of them are fighting from fight to fight, depending on what their deals are. He could always go back to Top Rank and return to his original plantation if he loves it there so damn much. But that's how you're supposed to be thinking if you actually have some level of foresight and understanding when it comes to your career and what you want to accomplish. So I'm not letting Terence Crawford off the hook when it comes to this.
He's doing what he has to do. Exhibit A, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury.
You see how they keep bringing up Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury? You see how Andre Ward did it here and Tim Bradley did it right after the fight? That's their new propaganda crux when it comes to Errol Spence and Sean Porter and Keith Thurman, and why they won't make a fight happen with Terence Crawford. It does not behoove them to make a fight happen with Terence Crawford when they already have 3 belts over on the PBC side. So these are essentially ramblings of desperation from these cats over at Top Rank. And once again, Andre Ward has become a shill for ESPN and Top Rank. I have respect for the brother's accomplishments. He's an extraordinary boxer. But for him to get on TV and talk about Errol Spence, a person who was just in a car crash where his damn car flipped over more times than the bus did at the start of 48 Hours Part 2. Remember that scene where Eddie Murphy first got out of prison and his bus flipped over 500 times? That's how Errol Spence's Ferrari looked, or Lamborghini, whatever the hell it was. And for Andre Ward to get on TV and try to call out Errol Spence or anybody else from the PBC, he should be ashamed of his damn self. everyone knows that even if the Errol Spence fight against Terence Crawford does happen, it's not going to happen for a very long time. The brother has to heal up. He has to fight a tune-up fight. And then he'll probably fight a bigger fight, most likely for a belt within the PBC. And then he'll probably challenge Crawford. But by that time, I suspect, at least if things work out how they're supposed to, that Bud Crawford will have signed to fight Shawn Porter if both fighters are as sincere as they claim. And Terence Bud Crawford can use that as a political hot potato against Errol Spence and say, don't tell me that the issue is the promotional companies or the management companies because I just fought Shawn Porter and beat him better than you did. So that's how you have to fight that war. Not by having announcers and commentators get on TV and be disrespectful. That's never going to work. Remember, one of the main factors, or one of the top factors that made Floyd Mayweather want to leave HBO was how disrespectful the commentating team started to become about him and what he brought to the table. So I have no idea why they think that this tactic is going to work now. And let's also keep in mind that the HBO commentators, they were also shills for Top Rank. People like Larry Merchant and Jim Lampley, they started to dog out Floyd Mayweather after he left Bob Arum and Top Rank. So I see a lot of this stuff going in the same direction. And if it didn't work before, it's not going to work now. Remember, when Floyd Mayweather, when he first came back, remember, he fought Oscar De La Hoya and then he fought Ricky Hatton in 2007. And then he took some time away. He called it a retirement, but he really was just letting his body heal. When he came back in 2009, the first fighter that he fought was Juan Manuel Marquez. And everyone castigated him. They said, why are you fighting Marquez? This is a guy coming up from 2 divisions underneath you. He was the 135-pound champion. Why are you fighting him? And Floyd Mayweather basically said this fighter was the best fighter available. But in reality, the reason why he fought Marquez is because he saw what Pacquiao and Bob Arum were doing. He saw how they were building Pacquiao up to try to take over the welterweight division by fighting fighters that Mayweather had already beaten, draining those fighters like how they drained De La Hoya and Ricky Hatton, beating them in a more dominating fashion than Mayweather did, and understanding that the repercussions of that would be that when they sat down at the bargaining table, Arum would be able to say, we've actually beaten fighters that you've beaten better than you have. So this is why we deserve a higher percentage of the purse or the revenue. So what Mayweather did was say, okay, I'm going to get into the ring with a fighter who has beaten Pacquiao a couple of times or beaten him once and had a controversial draw. I'm going to beat him in a more dominating fashion so that I have that bargaining chip myself. That's how Mayweather was thinking. And that's how Terence Crawford has to think. If he wants to consider himself the #1 guy in the world, it's not just about getting on TV and beating up bums and having the commentating team try to vouch for you. That's not going to help you out.
I hear about the politics stopping big fights from happening. Both of those fighters got a lot of throwback in them, that get me this fight mentality.
Let me ask you a question, Andre Ward. Didn't the politics stop you from making the fight with Triple G? Were you not negotiating with Triple G's team for 2 years? And the holdup was that you felt like they were trying to make you come down too far in weight? I believe they wanted to meet you at a catch weight of 164 or something like that. And you said no because you were not going to allow Triple G to drain you. So were those not politics? Those type of things happen in negotiations. And let me say this. With those two promotional companies being on the opposite sides of the street, or whatever term you want to use, that makes a far bigger difference than something like a weight issue. Because now they have to decide how they're going to divvy up everything. It's not just about, who fights where and on what network. It's about how much each faction is going to get paid. And that's why these are major issues. Yes, a fighter could walk into Al Heyman's office and say, get me this fight, I want this fight. And Al can get the fight made. But these fighters are only going to do it if it's in the best interest for them, as they're supposed to.
And I hope that Spence is on the mend. That's my brother. I'm wishing him well, but...
Allegedly. If he's your brother, then there should be no but. If he's your brother, then you understand he was in a horrific car crash. It wasn't some fender bender. So for you to be on TV trying to call out Errol Spence, man, you should be ashamed of yourself, Andre Ward.
Comes back at some point in time, he's got to face that dude, because if not, You win the battle, but you lose the war.
No, not quite. What happens is Errol Spence has to come back and he has to show that he's the same human being in the ring, that he can still sustain body shots and head shots, and that he can maintain his stamina in the ring and has the strength to impact the opposition in the same way that he did before. That's what he has to be concerned with. He's not supposed to be concerned with Terence Crawford. You're bringing up Terence Crawford because you work for Top Rank. And if Errol Spence is your brother like you claim, you would not be letting his name come out of your mouth like that in such a disrespectful tone. Once again, understand the cat was in a very serious car accident. It would make more sense if you were trying to call out Shawn Porter. Why are you not calling out Shawn Porter? That would make much more sense.
History will say that you never faced the other top welterweight in the division. Shawn.
No, not quite. Because unlike Terence Crawford, Errol Spence has actually faced another top welterweight in the division. He's actually faced two top welterweights, Kell Brook and Shawn Porter. No disrespect to Terence Crawford, but he has yet to face a truly top welterweight in the division. So history is not going to say that. What history is going to say is that Terence Crawford, at least for those who have intellect, what they're going to say is that Terence Crawford made the wrong decision in which company that he decided to sign back with.
Said he'll fight him.
And you know
those guys are shouting him out. You know, one thing that strikes me.
Let me rewind this back a little bit because Max Kellerman said Shawn Porter will fight him.
History will say that you never faced the other top welterweight in the division.
Shawn Porter said he'll fight him.
And you know
those guys are shouting him out. You know.
Thank you, Max Kellerman, for your fairness. I have to give you a bit of credit. So that makes me say that you are not the one who necessarily put the bug in Andre Ward's ear to make these asinine statements. Or maybe it was just him and Tim Bradley who decided independently that they're going to try to stick up for Bud Crawford because they're both very close friends with Bud Crawford. But Bud Crawford has to stick up for himself. And the main thing they have to do is understand the importance of the business side of boxing, because I truly hope that he's not going to be one of those guys 7-8 years from now, if this society, this world is still around in that time period, on TV talking about Bob Arum was robbing me blind. All these fights that I fought, he took way more money than he was supposed to take and blah, blah, blah. Because that's how these guys do. All these guys, all I want to do is fight. Those type of guys, they end up being the people with the most grievances.
The thing that strikes me about Terence Crawford, champ, is like Teofimo Lopez needs to fight to get it all out. Some guys find their refuge in the ring. Terence Crawford just likes to fight.
Yes, you can tell that Terence does just like to fight. He is a dog, but he needs to prove how big of a dog he is against the big dogs over at the PBC. And once again, do I think that he will beat most of those guys, if not all those guys? Yes, I do. But just because you can does not mean that you deserve the credit of having done so without doing so, because you never know what can happen. But just getting back to the point, once again, congratulations to Terence Bud Crawford and Teofimo Lopez on some very exciting performances. So peace.